That's right. So in order to avoid, so many of you do have childhood pain, right? You do have pain, whether it's with dad or mum, you've got some childhood pain. There's the childhood pain, so that's one problem. Then there's what you decide to do to avoid it, which is another problem. Now, you can have childhood pain and deal with it lovingly, and that's all about feeling it, working your way through it, being humble to it, not visiting it upon other people, not wanting spirits to come and help you out with it, wanting to go through it yourself, being responsible, going through it yourself, not needing to involve everybody else in the process of doing it. So there's a lot of loving ways you can deal with your childhood pain. But the average person doesn't do that. The average person goes, I want to avoid that childhood pain. So what can I do to avoid it? Now, the decision to, so having the childhood pain is one set of problems. The desire to avoid it is another set of problems. A completely different set of problems. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. On one hand, I've got the pain, so that's a problem. You know, obviously the pain is going to affect my life in some way or another. But the ways I choose to avoid it create, through the use of my will, create another set of problems. Often the set of problems created by my choice to avoid the childhood pain are greater than the set of problems created by having the childhood pain.
Yeah.
Do you follow?
Yeah.
Yep. So, in your case, you've had some childhood pain with mum, right? So you would like to avoid it.
Yeah.
How do you avoid it?
Until now, I've paired with like I'm not crying about it, and I'm thinking my mom is nice, and yeah.
So live in a delusion that mum's good,
yeah,
and then you don't have to deal with it. That's one way.
Yeah.
But another way is internally you still feel bad, though. See. So how do you feel good? So now, can you see now there's an openness to invite spirits into the process?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel good in comparison to your mother?
Yeah, I compete with her with things like
Yep.
yeah.
So it could be education. You compete with her in education. You compete with her by getting men's attention that she can't get. You compete with her. You know, there's different ways of competing with her, which many girls try. So you compete with her in these different ways. So then you become addicted to competing in order to avoid that childhood pain.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So many of our sins are not created by the childhood pain directly. They're created by the desire to avoid the childhood pain, which creates a second set of problems. You could basically, they say there's two sets of problems. One is the childhood pain, which is actually quite easy to deal with, believe it or not, in comparison to what we've chosen to do to avoid the childhood pain. So if we had to sort of draw it, you could say it's sort of like inside of yourself, you could say there's two landscapes, you know, two views, if you like, two landscapes. So one view, so I'll do all this in red because both things are not good. So the one view is I have pain, you know, childhood pain I'm talking about now, pain that happened in my childhood that is going to be painful to have to go through because it's in me. So I'm going to have to go through it, right? Then there's what can I do to stop myself from having that? Mm-hmm. What can I do to push that away from me? What can I do to block it? What can I do to stop myself from having it? What can I do to prevent it? What can I do to make myself feel happy even though I'm really sad? What can I do to keep it all buried? So there's this desire now. So and this you can see this is you didn't desire this, but now you're desiring. Desire, remember, desire is faith. So now you have faith that you can block it. You can control it. You can shut it down. You can prevent yourself from having it. This desire is powerful, right? So it's the desire to avoid that which is our primary sin. This is not our sin. Whose sin is this? Parents. It's our environment sin, isn't it? That we've imbibed from parents or whatever. So this is others' sin. So ironically, The desire to avoid others' sin, the pain of others' sin in our childhood, causes us to actually choose to do our own sins. Do you understand? So this is why this part here is the harder thing to deal with, because we chose it. Do you understand? When I choose it, I am now passionate to do it. I wasn't passionate for this, that just happened to me. But now I'm going, I want to get rid of that, I want to avoid that. Now I'm going, I'm dedicated to doing the avoidance process. I'm dedicated, and I'm doing whatever is necessary. So I basically fundamentally have the underlying ideal that I'll do whatever I have to do. Whatever I have to do to get out of that, I'm gonna do, right? And that's where most of our sin is.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, Julie?
Yeah.
So the key with humility is to go, right, if I choose to avoid others' sin towards myself, the net result is I'm going to sin myself more.
Almost automatically.
Automatically I'm going to sin more.
Yeah.
Because, and also this sin, because it's been my desire, it will be attributed to me. And because it's attributed to my soul, it's going to be harder to address than the pain of what somebody else did was to address. So this is the problem that many of you are facing, that it's not the childhood problems that are your main problem or your main sin, not the thing you have to repent for, right? The thing you need to repent for is your desire to avoid it and all the things you did to attempt to avoid it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All the things you chose to do because you wanted desperately to not have this pain. Right? That's where the majority of our problems lie, in this desire that we developed over the course of our life. So the desire began usually in our young childhood. You know, by the time we were 7, already the desire to avoid things was established. And then during our teenage years, you usually ramp it up huge. You know, like during your teenage years, it's like, I'm doing everything, drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever I can do now to avoid this pain. And so we just keep on accruing more difficulties in terms of having to address it. And also, ironically, our fear of this increases because of that. The more things you do to avoid it, the greater your fear becomes about it. And that's the irony of it. It's sort of like, and I look at it and go, why are you so afraid of that? It's just a little thing.
Yeah, compared to all this shit.
Compared to all this, you know. It's like, the way I feel is, I'm scared of myself doing that. Do you understand? Like if I see in myself a desire developing to avoid some of this, I'm freaked out, right? Because I know this is the area that is that's going to cause the main trouble, right? So this doesn't freak me out at all. So I can cry, that's easy. So I can even be terrified to whatever degree, that's easy. I can handle that. But when it comes to this, from a conscience perspective and a guilt perspective and a shame perspective and a lot of other perspectives, this is hard to handle. And this is why a lot of people find progress so hard, because they can't handle how they develop their desire to sin. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's very important to recognise in yourself the desire to avoid, and recognise all of the things that happened as a result of that desire. Now, what Mary mentioned to you during the week was one of the things. You know, the desire to engage in a, let's call it a healing modality, shall we?
Yeah.
Which is spirit-driven,
Yeah.
which makes you feel better
Myself.
about yourself,
Yeah.
right? So fundamentally, you're doing it not to make other people feel better about it,
Mm-hmm.
to make you feel better about yourself. And then, of course, you can become a conduit for those spirits because you're now open to them. So now when you're doing your healing work, some of the people who you're healing, if they are open to it, they will actually feel like traumatized by the so-called healing.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That makes sense? And this is also very common. There was one one New Age, it was like a, what would you call it, function in Adelaide that I went to years and years ago now. This would have been like 20 years ago, or more, 15 or so years ago. Before I met Mary, it was, so it must have been more than 20 years ago. And I went there and I noticed every single person who was doing this hands-on healing was actually taking sexual energy from the people they were so-called healing. Yeah, it was dark as, sleazy as. It was like this whole auditorium. There was a whole line of people who were healers, right? Claiming to be healers. And in this one side of the auditorium, there was just a long line of healers. On the other side was a long line of mediums, all doing their mediumship work. But on one side, there was a long line of healers. Not a single one of them was healing anybody. But everybody walked away feeling better because they had been sexually touched up and they liked it. And it's sleazy as, yeah. But that's healing in sort of the illusion of healing based upon addictions being met. Yeah. There's many, many people involved in that today. And for the same reason, because their desire to
Feel better.
avoid, to feel better about themselves,
began
them on a path that in the end caused them to sin more. Mary, you want to?
I just wanted to mention that, going back to your initial topic of the talk, that all these things on this side is essentially what God measures.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, so God's not measuring. God attributes the pain of your childhood to other people. So that's not the reason why you sin, and that's not the reason why you're in pain. The reason why you're in pain is because of the choices and decisions you've made to sin. Do you understand? Now, sure, some of those choices and decisions come from the childhood, but only in the sense that they come from your desire to avoid your childhood, right? If you chose to not avoid your childhood, then you would be free. Sorry, thanks.
I'm trying to understand, if we are all like sort of blank slates entering the world.
Yep.
Then the desire to avoid must have also been encouraged and educated.
Certainly. If you think about the average parent and the average person in society, most people want to avoid any emotional pain they have at any time. So the desire to avoid emotional pain is encouraged. That's at the moment. It doesn't have to be that way, of course. If we were perfected humans, none of us would do that. But unfortunately, the majority of us are trying to avoid the pain of our childhood. So what happens is you grow up to become an adult, you have children of your own, and you encourage them to avoid any pain of their childhood too, or any pain at all, if you can. And this is why each generation, like if you look at the generation now, they hardly can cope with like an ounce of pain, because parents have nursed them and away from any pain they might experience on any level at all. They don't even they're never hungry. As soon as they want something, go get it. You know what I mean? Like most parents think that's what being a good parent is. You give your child whatever it wants, whenever it wants it, And this creates very weak children who can't cope with any pain. And as a result of not being able to cope, as soon as they have some pain, which they're definitely going to have, given the fact that the world we're living in is very unkind, they're definitely going to have some pain. What are they going to do with it? They're going to choose to avoid it by creating a desire to avoid and doing all sorts of things to avoid, and thereby sinning a lot. And so what I'm seeing happening is actually each generation that comes along generally sins more than the prior generation sinned, just in a different way. Yeah.
So is a part of that desire to avoid, like maybe half of it, I don't know, is still others sin?
Certainly, some of it is, but the methods you choose to avoid are your choices. So while the desire to avoid is one thing, and some of that comes from your childhood, the ways you choose to avoid are your creations. So that's another thing. So the methods you use to avoid are often completely the opposite of your own parents' methods to avoid. Do you understand? Like you might have a method, like a parent chooses drink to avoid. And you hate that, like you just hate drink and I hate alcohol. you're never going to choose alcohol to avoid under those circumstances. You'll choose something else. You might choose sex, or you might choose addictions of other kinds, food, all sorts of things to avoid on the physical layer or emotional layer. You might choose all sorts of other things to avoid, but you're definitely probably not going to choose alcohol, because even the smell of alcohol makes you feel enraged with your dad, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. So you're not going to do that. So this is what my mother did. My mother's father was an alcoholic. He was abusive, violent when he was when he was drinking. I can remember times when my mother was bashing him with a frying pan, stopping him from coming into the window of our house because Mum had locked all the doors. And this was when she was 7. She would have been, I was like 1 or 2 years of age probably. So she would have been 18. She's bashing her father, drunk father, who's violent, yelling and screaming at her over the head with a frying pan, to the point where she knocks him out and gets him out the window. And he calls the police and tries to charge her with assault. Right, he was the one climbing in through the window, of course. And the police just said, Murray, we're just going to, Murray, who's his name, we're going to whack you in the jail for a night, let you calm down. Then in the morning when he was sober, he was often quite tame. And as a result of that, he didn't charge my mother, but while he was drunk, he wanted to. But she was bashing him over the head with a frying pan, right, to the point of like knocking him out. She thought she'd killed him, but she just knocked him out. Now, my mum hates the thought of anybody being drunk, as you can imagine. Like, she's not going to choose drunkenness as a method of getting away from a childhood pain. But she's chosen a lot of other things to get away. Yeah. And she's gone into this very stoic, rigid, religious, state to try and get away from the pain. But she's not going to choose the way that her father had, because that just makes her feel rage and terror. Yeah. Makes sense, Si? Thank you. So the choices we make in our development of our desires to avoid are personal and very much attributed to our own condition. Yeah. The underlying desire to avoid, which can be just a single desire, is going to be partially attributed, of course, to our parents and our environment. But we can't blame everything on that. Yeah. G'day guys, what's the time? Must be pretty late now, huh?
20 past 5.
20 past 5, yeah. Okay. It's probably time to finish, eh? It's getting a bit warm in here again this evening.
Sorry, I've been flicking it on and off as people get
it just needs
hot
to be
and
left
cold.
on, I think. Yeah, so hopefully in this discussion you see firstly how God measures things. And of course now what we're getting into is a discussion about like what God measures in terms of love, in terms of the nitty-gritties of what God measures, And God's constantly measuring the condition of love that exists. And if you see that, then it means that you're then armed to go, okay, if I want to be happy and I also want to live in harmony with the laws to be happy, then it's going to mean me learning what those measures are. So that's the truth, you'd call that truth. Me wanting to know what those measures are, that's humility. And me deciding to live up to those measures and become more loving myself. And to do that, I'm going to have some faith that it's possible, right? And you can see how the discussion relates to all those fundamental principles of faith, humility, truth, and love, right? Good. So I'd just like to say, I'd like to, my battery must be just about out, I think.
No, I've been keeping an eye.
Monitoring everything. So I'd just like to say, please come along to our days this month coming up, because you will have a few days, won't you? I think you girls have organised two a week, Friday and Saturday each week for the coming month. Please come along to these days with an attitude of wanting to learn about love, rather than just coming along and doing some work and going home or whatever. Yeah? Please have that attitude. This is the attitude we're going to encourage the directors to encourage you to have, and this is the attitude also that when we notice you don't have it, we will say to you, you don't have that. You're not interested in learning to love here, so why are you here? Right? We want you to come along with the attitude where you want to learn to love. And if you don't want to do that, then there's really not a lot of point coming along. Can you see? Don't make Phoebe, Eloisa, Mary, Mai, Archie, Sandra, Diane's lives more difficult by coming along with the wrong attitude, because that in itself is an unloving thing to do. It's like visiting your problems upon another. If you come along with the right attitude, you'll be easy to share truth to and teach, and it'll be easy for you to see love versus what's not love. It'll be easier to do that, and it'll be more fun for all of the people who are managing you, because I'm concerned about the amount of fun they have. So at the moment it's not very fun. So I'm concerned about the amount of fun they have. And so my feeling is if we can change this, then everybody can have a joy of being present, being here. Yeah. And I know some of you are developing that joy, right? Some of you are feeling like more joy in being here. But I would really like the people who have some responsibilities to be able to experience more joy as well. All right, guys? Well.